There's something we rarely talk about when we tell stories about transformation. We talk about the moment of realization. We talk about the breakthrough. We talk about the courage it takes to change. But we rarely talk about the people who stood quietly nearby while the change was happening. The ones who watched. The ones who stayed. The ones who didn't try to control the story, but who remained present long enough to see how it unfolded. Today, I want to talk about one of those people in my life, Michael. Michael has known many versions of me. He knew me when I was moving fast, building, creating, chasing ideas with the energy of someone who believed the next breakthrough might finally quiet the deeper questions. He knew the version of me that was constantly producing something. Projects, programs, frameworks, ideas that seemed to arrive faster than I could fully integrate them. And from the outside, that season probably looked impressive. But inside, something was still unsettled. There was movement everywhere, but not yet stillness. There was productivity, but not yet peace. And Michael saw that, not in a judgmental way, just in the quiet way that someone who knows you well can see the deeper currents beneath the surface. What I appreciate most about Michael is not that he tried to fix anything. He didn't. He didn't attempt to manage my process. He didn't try to correct the pace or shape the direction. He simply remained present. And that presence matters more than most people realize. Because when you are in the middle of becoming, you often don't know exactly who you are becoming yet. You only know that something in the old structure no longer fits. Something in the old operating system is beginning to dissolve. And during those seasons, the presence of someone who stays, someone who doesn't panic when things shift, can create a kind of quiet stability. A sense that this unfolding process is allowed. There were conversations Michael and I had over the years that were not dramatic. They were simple. Two people talking. Two people sharing observations about life, about work, about purpose, about the strange, unpredictable ways our paths unfold. But inside those conversations was something deeper. There was space. Space to think out loud. Space to question things. Space to say, I'm not entirely sure what the next version of my life looks like yet. And instead of rushing toward answers, Michael allowed the space to exist. That is rarer than you might think. Most people become uncomfortable when someone they care about is in transition. They want to stabilize the story quickly. They want to offer advice. They want to move things back towards certainty. But Michael has always had a kind of calm patience with the process of becoming. And over time, that patience created room for something important to happen. Integration. At some point in every person's life, the speed slows down. Not because the energy disappears, but because the deeper questions finally demand to be heard. For me, that slowing down began when I stopped trying to outrun the question that eventually became the title of the book. Life, what's the point? At first, it was not a poetic question. It was a real one. A quiet inquiry that surfaced in moments of stillness. What is the point of all this movement? What is the point of building and building and building? What is the deeper thread that makes a life meaningful? And during the seasons when those questions were rising more clearly, Michael remained part of the landscape of my life. not as someone providing answers, but as someone who had seen enough of the journey to understand that something real was unfolding. One of the gifts of a long friendship is perspective. People who have known you across multiple chapters of life carry a kind of historical memory. They remember who you were when you first started searching. They remember the earlier attempts, the early ideas, the unfinished projects. And when those same people witness the moment when the pieces finally begin to come together, there is something powerful about that recognition. It's not applause, it's not celebration, it's something quieter. A kind of shared understanding that the journey has depth. The story didn't appear overnight. As the release of Life What's the Point approaches, I find myself thinking about that journey. Not just the writing of the book, but the years of living that made the writing possible. The years of exploration. The years of building and learning and questioning. And when I look back across that landscape, there are people who appear in different seasons of that story. Some arrive for a moment. Some walk alongside for a chapter. And a few remain long enough to witness the full arc of becoming. Michael is one of those people. This episode is not just about Michael, it's about the role that witnesses play in all of our lives. Think about your own journey for a moment. Who are the people who have seen multiple versions of you? Who knew you when you were still trying to figure things out? Who stayed present when your life began to change? Who listened when your ideas were still forming? Those people are part of the architecture of your becoming, not because they built the life for you, but because their presence made the unfolding possible. The vibrational stage exists for conversations like this, not the highlight reel, not the polished narrative that makes transformation sound easy, but the deeper story. The long arc of life evolving over time. And the people who stand nearby while that evolution takes place. Because no one becomes who they are meant to be entirely alone. We are shaped by relationships, by conversations, by the quiet influence of those who see us clearly enough to remain present while we grow. As we move closer to the release of Life What's the Point, I want to acknowledge the truth openly. This work did not emerge from isolation. It emerged from a life lived in relationship, from conversations, from reflections, from the presence of people who stayed. Michael is one of those people. And today's episode is simply an expression of gratitude for the role that witness plays in the unfolding of life. If there's someone in your life who has witnessed your becoming, someone who stayed through multiple seasons of your journey, you might take a moment today to acknowledge that, not with fanfare, just with quiet appreciation. Because the ones who stay long enough to see who we become are rare, and their presence shapes more of our lives than we often realize. This is the vibrational stage, and the story continues.